I'm Hunter Atkins, Chairman of the Board of the Bank of Nashville. The Bank of Nashville sponsors CEOCafe programs. It is our gift to the business community and the people of Nashville who want to be informed on current topics. Today, AlexTolbert of Bernard Health will be with us to talk about health insurance. There's no more timely topic and no topic that is garnering more of our information and our media column inches than healthcare. So today, help me welcome AlexTolbert in the CEO Cafe presented by the Bank of Nashville.
Morning. On behalf of the Bank of Nashville team, we're happy to have everybody here. This is an important event for us. We focus a lot on small to medium-sized businesses. I think that's really one of our specialties. And as Jim said, kind of our motto, tagline, is we're here to get you there. So if you're interested in having a banker who really cares about you, who will take a personal interest, we'd love you to spend some time and talk to us and give us a chance. So we got a lot of folks here, and I know we're all excited to hear from Alex this morning. It's a very timely topic, so we'll get on with the program. Welcome.
After learning about health savings accounts during his third year at the Vanderbilt MBA Law School, Alex began to realize that that could be an innovative way to kind of realign the misaligned incentives in the American healthcare system. In 2006, he founded Bernard Health. Since then has become an expert, and I'm going to read these because he's an expert in so many things. Health savings accounts, health reimbursement arrangements, consumer-driven healthcare, web-based benefits administration, and retail-based health insurance advisory. To think that a student could actually think at the same time he was a student was innovative all by itself, I think. But Alex went on to become named the most innovative broker, and that's a national award that was awarded in 2011. What a timely time in our nation's history, given healthcare and all that we hear about it, to bring in somebody with Alex's expertise and knowledge. With a resume like that, he probably was also responsible for Vanderbilt beating Georgia. So let's give him a big round of applause.
Thank you, Jim. Well, thank you everyone for being here this morning. I'm really excited to be here, and I appreciate that introduction. Just for me to help get a little bit of an idea of the audience and you all, this is supposed to be about healthcare reform's greatest opportunities for business owners, CFOs, and healthcare entrepreneurs. I'd add another category to that, which would just be concerned citizens. So as you think about yourself, why you're here, in those three categories, how many find themselves, when they think about healthcare reform, think about it mainly from kind of an employer or business owner, executive director of a nonprofit perspective? Okay, great. And then how many would think about it mainly from a healthcare entrepreneur perspective? And then finally, a concerned citizen, thinking about it from an individual family perspective. All right, great. So we've got about almost a third. Maybe I saw a lot of people who raised their hand for concerned citizen as well as one of the other categories. So that's really helpful as we go through and talk about the greatest opportunities that healthcare reform is helping to bring about. When we talk about this, we're going to start with the bottom line. So I've kind of been trained to always lead with the bottom line, tell you what I'm going to tell you up front, and then we'll go down the path of how we get to the bottom line. Once we've discussed the bottom line, we'll go and supply some context, some background that helps to give an idea of how we got to where we are in healthcare. We'll talk about what life's like today in the healthcare system. We'll be brief there because we all know what it's like, right? It's pretty bad. We'll talk about what tomorrow looks like. When I say tomorrow, I mean the future. And then last, we'll talk about the opportunity. We'll circle back to that bottom line and what it means, again, from that healthcare entrepreneur and that employer and even concerned citizen standpoint. One thing just to describe what has informed a lot of the things we'll talk about today, Bernard Health, the company Jim mentioned that I started, we started out advising employers, and we were helping employers with health savings account-based health plans. When we were helping employers, we saw that while employers needed help managing their health plan expenses, individuals and families really need a lot of help too. And there weren't a lot of places to go to get help. And so we started opening up healthcare retail stores. And we opened the first one over at 100 Oaks in 2010. We now have 4 retail stores. We're opening up 2 more next month, so we'll have 6. In our stores, we have non-commissioned advisors who help individuals and families figure out what the right health insurance or Medicare strategy is for them. The third part of what we do is we saw that these employers, while they were offering health plans to their employees, they were administering everything with paperwork. And so we started a software part of our business that's developed a SaaS web-based benefits administration platform called Bernie Portal. I want to share that with you because all of the things we've observed in working with employers and seeing how they make their buying decisions in healthcare, and then individuals and families in our retail stores and how they make their decisions in buying healthcare, have really informed what we're going to talk about. That's where this is all coming from. The bottom line of what's happening in healthcare right now is that the customer is changing. And as we talk about how the customer is changing, it's important to first define what we mean when we say customer. The customer is whoever's paying. If you've ever gone to the doctor, if you've gone to the hospital, you didn't pay anything, you weren't the customer. You were maybe a patient, maybe a consumer, you weren't the customer. The customer was someone else. That's changing so that instead of it being the employer, the insurance company, the government who is paying for health care, it's now us, all us regular old people or patients who are paying for health care. As we are the ones paying for health care and we're the new customers in health care, that's going to produce a lot of changes to the healthcare system. Why? Well, first, when we're paying for our own health care, or a lot more of it than we were before, we have an opportunity to take more responsibility for where the money goes in healthcare. If we're, as individual customers, directing the money, we can reward higher value medical providers. And we can define higher value on what's important to us as individuals. We couldn't do that before. That extra responsibility we have also frees up providers. Providers have historically felt trapped because it was always their customer was the government, or it was the insurance companies, or it was the employers. Now they can develop new and different and in a lot of ways better business models to respond to us patients. As we become the customers and we're paying, they can develop better business models. The combination of those two things, us having more responsibility and the providers being able to develop better business models, is going to result in healthier people and lower costs. So that's a pretty good outcome. And now, it's not all driven by healthcare reform. A lot of what's happening actually would have happened with or without healthcare reform. Healthcare reform is probably making a lot of the changes that we're going to see happen more quickly than they otherwise would have. And that'll make more sense as we go. Let's go ahead and do that and get into the context behind the healthcare system as it exists today. To do that, we have to go back all the way to Casablanca, Bing Crosby, and the Stabilization Act of 1942. Does anyone know what the Stabilization Act of 1942 is? Got some hands raised. This act was passed at a time when the country was very worried about inflation. World War II was going on. Employers were having to compete to get employees, and they were doing that by paying higher and higher wages. The government said, we got to do something about these higher wages, and they instituted wage controls, which solved the problem of higher wages. It was illegal to pay higher salaries. It didn't solve the problem that employers were still needing to compete to get employees. And there was some ambiguity in the tax code related to whether or not insurance benefits could be provided tax-free. Some more aggressive employers looked at that ambiguity and said, yep, they can be provided tax-free. And they started offering insurance benefits to compete for employees, which means the employers who didn't do it were at a disadvantage, and eventually they had to do it, which led to this really awkward situation where so many employers were offering health insurance tax-free that the government had to respond to that. And it took them a little while to do so, but they did it. 1954, Roger Bannister ran the 4-minute mile. I Love Lucy was at the top of the charts, and we got the new Internal Revenue Code of 1954. Health insurance can be provided tax-free. So if you're an employer and you're trying to look for ways to compensate your employees, one way you can do it and not pay any taxes on it, and your employees won't pay any taxes, is to provide health insurance. So all of the energy, kind of in the things that have been happening to cause employers to offer health insurance to their employees really got going when all the ambiguity went away about whether providing insurance could be done tax-free. The next important year was 1965. So we had, the Beatles, Bonanza was #1, and we got Medicare. Now, why is Medicare important in this story? Well, Medicare is important because with Medicare, the government said, we want to provide insurance coverage for the elderly. So they did that. Now, to do that, they had to figure out how are we going to pay all the providers. And the way they did it is they came up with this huge spreadsheet. And some insurance companies were doing it at the time, but once Medicare did it, there was kind of no turning back. They came up with this huge spreadsheet. And across the top of the spreadsheet, one way to think about it is that they had kind of all the different regions of the country. And then down the side of the spreadsheet, they had all the different healthcare products and services that one could possibly get or have done. And then they filled in the spreadsheet with prices, which are the reimbursement rates. And that put us in a fee-for-service healthcare system. So the tax code got it so that employers were providing health insurance benefits tax-free, and Medicare helped enforce that the business model for healthcare was going to be fee-for-service. The two main takeaways from this that are really important to understanding what's happening with healthcare reform are that we learned that tax policy for healthcare benefits define the customer. All of us as employers, sometimes in talks like this, I'll ask employers, why do you offer health benefits? And people will say, well, I offer it because I care about my employees. I do healthcare benefits because health insurance is important. I don't want my employees to be worried about their health care. Those are good reasons, but you could be given $5,000 vacations to your employees too, right? There are a lot of things you give your employees as a benefit. Employers give health insurance benefits to their employees because it's tax-free. That's why it happened. That's why we all do it. Now, once we've defined who the customer is with tax policy, the customer defines what the business model is going to be, right? And the customer was the insurance companies, it was the government, and fee-for-service was going to be the business model because their needs as the customer were to figure out an efficient way to name what the prices were going to be for healthcare. So that need was met first. Healthcare reform is reversing all of this. So we're going to talk about that here in a minute. Before we do, let's just pause and talk about what impact what happened in the 1940s, 1950s, 1960s has had on us today. So today, this is a picture of what it looks like to offer health insurance as an employer to your employees. You're trying to do something nice. You're trying to give a benefit, right, to your people. You found that doing so has put you right in the middle between your employees and all of healthcare dysfunction. When costs go up 15% because of healthcare dysfunction, and you as the employer stress about it, try to figure out, should we make the plan a little bit worse this year? Should we charge employees a little bit more? Gosh, this feels like it's my fault as an employer. And in fact, even if you're strong, you don't feel like it's your fault, when you start talking to your employees about how costs are up 15%, you're sure that some of them are blaming you that healthcare costs went up, like it's your fault. And there's a tremendous amount of negative energy that goes on in between the employer and the employees. So much negative energy, in fact, that almost no negative energy or any energy at all gets put on, well, how do we make this healthcare system better? It's just as bad for doctors. You know, I went to see my doctor, jerk. Sat in the waiting room for 45 minutes. He took me back there and didn't even look at me. I was in there a minute and a half. These poor doctors, right? They grew up dreaming of being doctors. They wanted to help people, right? And then they went to medical school and they worked really, really hard to be able to get to a point where they could help people. And then, gosh, they got in there and there was all this healthcare dysfunction. And they found themselves in this position where, the customer is the government, right? It's Medicare. The customer is the insurance company, or it's a self-insured employer. And they're telling me I have to do fee-for-service. That's the only business model I've got available to me. And they're not paying me to have a relationship with my patients like I grew up dreaming of. They're paying me to churn office visits. It's the only business model I've got available. So employers and doctors get blamed by all of us people, right? Like it's their fault. That's where we are today. Tomorrow's a brighter day. And it was bound to be a brighter day because all of that dysfunction was bound to eventually fall on itself, right? We weren't going to put up with it forever. We weren't going to put up with rising costs forever. Healthcare reform is accelerating, more and more people not putting up with it anymore. And let's go ahead and get into some numbers here on why that is and talk about what's set the stage for the dramatic change we're seeing. It's 2010, right? So we had Kesha, Brentwood's own, Mad Men, and we had healthcare reform. Healthcare reform, which I alluded to earlier, took everything that was done in the 1940s, 1950s, and 1960s and reversed it. Now, what do I mean by reversed it? Remember how I said tax policy, we learned tax policy defined the customer, and then the customer defined the business model. Well, healthcare reform has changed the tax model or the tax policy from being one where the tax incentives were towards employer-based coverage to one where they're now towards an individual-based coverage. And that change from employer-focused tax subsidies to individual-focused tax subsidies is redefining who the customer is. It's going to be us. And here are some numbers to put a fine point on that. So right now, in the group health insurance market, a $7,500 health insurance premium plan. So the cost of the insurance is $7,500. If you make $200,000 a year, the premiums would be $7,500. There would be no income taxes at all related to that $7,500. There would also be no FICA taxes at all related to that $7,500. And the kind of total net cost would be $7,500. Now, with individual coverage, there are going to be income taxes that have to be paid on that $7,500, and there are going to be FICA taxes. So the total cost, if you make $200,000 a year, just changed for you and your family from $7,500 to $10,549 total cost. But what if your family, what if you only make $50,000 a year? Remember I said the tax policies changed. Well, before, you know, it was $7,500, just like if you made $200,000. There's no difference. In the individual market, today, when I say today, I mean starting January 1st, that $7,500 premium plan would only cost you $1,800 in premiums. Now, why is that? Who's picking up the rest of the cost? The government. They're doing it with direct cash subsidies to the insurance companies so that you don't have to pay the whole amount. Now, you still have to pay income taxes on the $1,800 and FICA taxes, but your net cost ends up being $2,208. So you went from $7,500 to $2,208. Someone making $200,000 a year went from $7,500 to $10,549. Now, some might say that, well, this is unfair. This is unfair because, you know, the people making $200,000, they've got higher taxes with health care reform. Now, others would respond, first of all, are you surprised that your taxes went up with health care reform? That shouldn't be a surprise, right? But another thing to point out is that, you know, before reform, in the individual market, for someone making $50,000 or a family making $50,000, the total cost to them in the individual market would have been $9,199, which means that the value of the employer, the group subsidy, was greater for people making $200,000 than $50,000 when the subsidies were only available in the employer or group market. So it's because of marginal tax rates, right? Marginal tax rates make it so that if I'm getting $7,500 tax-free as someone who makes $200,000, that's worth more than if I'm getting a tax break on $7,500 as someone who only makes $50,000. And so historically, people making more money got a bigger tax break. For the last 70 years, that's been the case. Now, looks like we might be entering a period where people making less money get a better tax break. This chart right here sums up the biggest reason why small and medium-sized employers are going to quickly start transitioning from employer-based coverage, group coverage, to helping their employees with individual policies. It's going to be small employers doing it first, and then down the line, larger employers will do it. Here's how they're going to do it. Before, they said, look, we offer two plans, employees. We offer X and we offer Y. We're not going to do that anymore. The tax incentives have changed. And we're no longer going to just offer two plans. We're going to say, you go get whatever you want. There are hundreds of options out there. You can't be declined anymore in the individual market. In fact, there are networks that are less expensive, like Network E from Blue Cross, that are available in the individual market that are not available in the small group market. So we're going to give you more options, and we're going to help you pay for them. We're going to give you $250 a month as a reimbursement for the cost of the coverage. And what's that going to do to who the customer is in healthcare? It's going to make it so it's a lot more about us, right, than the employer. We're picking the insurance policy. We're picking our networks. If Blue Cross Network E is less expensive because St. Thomas charges less than other hospitals in town, we're going to be able to respond to that and take action. Doctors and providers are going to be able to build better business models. Remember how before the employer had put him or herself in between the employees and the dysfunction? Well, now the employer gets to sit on the same side of the table as the employees. And you know what? If those individual insurance policy rates go up next year, they go up 15%, an employee comes in and says, man, my Aetna policy went up 15%. The employer gets to say, oh, Cigna did it to me too. Isn't it terrible? Instead of it somehow being the employer's fault. And then all that negative energy that used to take place in between the employer and the employees, that energy can instead be focused on making the healthcare system better by us rewarding higher value providers and rewarding providers that are developing new business models that address our needs more closely. It's also good for doctors. New business models have already developed. Qliance and Medline are two examples of direct primary care business models where Qliance, for example, which is backed by Jeff Bezos in Seattle, the Amazon.com founder, charges a low monthly fee for unlimited primary and chronic care management. It's able to charge $69 a month. You get a relationship with your provider. You're seen on time. You have 30-minute or 30-minute, hour-long appointments, whatever it is you need. Things that you can't get, you can't deliver as a provider if you're stuck in a fee-for-service business model. But a subscription-based business model, you can do it. And they're showing that all of us customers like it. So last slide, the opportunity for business owners and CFOs, the opportunity is to get involved, right? When I showed that $250 reimbursement rate that an employer could do instead of offering a group health plan, it's a great idea. And you saw your lower wage employees could save a lot of money on their healthcare expenses if they take advantage of the tax opportunities out there. You can save a lot of money too. It could be that your group plan's costing you $400 a month now. Could be that you look at your employee base, you look at what the tax subsidy opportunities are, you look at all the different networks, and you could reimburse $300 instead of $400, and your employees would still be better off. The defined contribution path may not be one you can go all the way to transitioning individual coverage today, but there are steps you can take on that path. It's a big opportunity. For healthcare entrepreneurs, stop referring to the patients as patients and start referring to them as customers. Even if they're not a huge part of your revenue today, people who are paying for their own care, over time it's going to be more and more, and it'll probably have a great impact on your model. I'd go so far even to say to think about becoming reimbursement independent. Some people in healthcare would say, there's no way we could be reimbursement independent. And that's definitely true for some parts of the healthcare system. But if you're an entrepreneur who doesn't have a business yet, this is where the future's heading. And for the providers who are not able to start thinking about it that way and delivering value in that way, it's an opportunity for new startups. So thank you all for your time, and if anyone has any questions, I'm supposed to, yep. So the question is, if I'm a large employer and I have, let's call large 100 employees. Is that okay to call it 100? So we'll call large 100 employees. Healthcare reform holds that if I don't offer a group health insurance plan to my employees, then I'm subject to a fine of $2,000 per employee for every employee's over a 30-employee threshold. So $140,000 would be my fine. Now that penalty was delayed by a year. So it was supposed to be in effect in 2014. It was delayed by a year to 2015 because the infrastructure wasn't ready to be able to enforce it. I think part of your question is probably, if I have to pay a fine of $140,000 as a larger employer, am I able to also, on top of paying that fine, reimburse employees and help them with the cost of individual coverage? And the answer to that question is it'll depend. Some employers are spending way more than $2,000 per employee on health insurance costs. So if you're spending let's call it $6,000, which is a lot of industry insiders would say an average is $500 a month per employee. So if you're spending $6,000 per employee right now on group health insurance, you drop your plan. When I say drop, I mean transition, help employees transition to individual coverage, pay the $2,000 per employee fine, there'd still be $4,000 there that you could use, maybe keep some of it for corporate savings if the company needs it, and the rest is a reimbursement for employees. We also see some large employers who are expecting that there is a high likelihood that penalty will never go into place. It'll never happen. And in fact, The fact that it's been delayed a year is a great opportunity to go ahead and transition now, because you'll save on health insurance costs this year by doing it. And next year, if they bring the penalty back, I mean, you could always bring a group health plan back if you wanted to, but you would pay the fine. So we see a lot of larger employers that are thinking this way, either being more aggressive about doing it now or saying, well, let's wait one more year. And if they don't implement it in 2015, it's very hard to envision that the next president's going to say, hey, I want to be the guy, or I want to be the woman that institutes the employer penalty. So probably it would never happen. So the question is, do people see the law evolving to address situations where the employer no longer or decides not to offer coverage to the spouse any longer? I think I would say it's probably unlikely. And the reason for that is that spouses who are not offered coverage by the employer or the right spouses who are not offered coverage through their spouse's employer are able to get coverage in the individual market. There's no more threat of being declined, and furthermore, are able to get subsidies that they wouldn't have been able to get had they been eligible for coverage through the spouse's employer. The question was, Alex, you didn't mention health savings accounts. Weren't they a key milestone in healthcare reform? And they are. And I mentioned that there are steps one can take towards a full defined contribution strategy. And one of those steps, if you're an employer that has already instituted health savings accounts, you're ahead of the game versus an employer who hasn't. Because your employees are that much more accustomed to having responsibility over their healthcare spending. And they're that much more accustomed to receiving a flat dollar amount from you for some part of their health benefit. And so, yes, they were a very important part of reform, and that was from all the way back in 2003, and they'll continue to be. The question is to explain further what reimbursement independent means. Doctors sometimes, and my wife's a nurse practitioner and works in an ER, will talk about all these things that doctors have to do, that they're forced to do by being doctors. And another way to say that would be to say that doctors choose to put up with all of the Medicare rules, all of the insurance company rules, because of the patient volume that it assures to their practice. It's a choice. There's a doctor in Green Hills, Dr. Melissa Langley, who decided, and Q-Liance has done it, decided, I'm not going to make that choice anymore. I'm going to be reimbursement independent. I'm going to work on the value proposition that I provide to patients and articulating it and demonstrating it, and I'm going to charge my patients directly. And there's a lot in healthcare where the cost of a visit or the subscription fee can be less than $100. So there's a lot of opportunity there to have a reimbursement. It's a great question. It's one that a lot of employers would have on their minds. And that is, I've been providing this group health insurance benefit for so long. And it feels like if I tell my employees I'm not going to offer it anymore, and instead I'm going to give them a reimbursement amount for them to get individual coverage, that there's going to be a lot of blowback. There's going to be a lot of pushback from my employees. And there may be some hurt feelings. There may be a lack of trust. It may hurt our culture. Another good point just got pointed out, that competing employers, those competing employers that keep a group health plan, start poaching my employees. I think in the early years, first of all, one good thing to bear in mind is that there are companies right now that are working on that exact problem. Even opening up like these bricks and mortar retail stores where these it's amazing, right? And they've got this employer advisory unit that does nothing but think about that problem and how to articulate to employees that this is not a lower benefit, but this is an improvement. And it's all about optimizing tax advantages for the people. And that they can all go to these stores for free and order these compassionate, non-commissioned independent advisors to find the right plan. I know. So there are people working on that problem. But to your point, in the early years, there probably will be a feeling that that my employer's out to get me here. This has got to be bad. When that will start to change is when the employer's $50,000 a year employee hears from their neighbor that their neighbor got family health insurance for $1,800, and your employee has to pay $7,500. And then you've got your $50,000 a year people walking into your office saying, "You are screwing me by offering me a group health plan. Would you please drop it?" That'll come. Neighbors talk. So there'll be a transition period. But so the question is, Bernard Health's model is that we have non-commissioned advisors who work in our stores, and we hold ourselves out as the experts and the authority, most trusted advisor when it comes to helping people plan how to pay for their health care. And how are we able to take the knowledge that maybe originally only a few of us at Bernard had and distill it across all of these, the question was 22-year-olds who sometimes could be prone to blank stares and regurgitating things that aren't answers to their questions in an efficient way, in a way that we can scale our business. And so the way that we're doing that, and first of all, it's really hard. It's really hard. It's great work. It's great work. You can build a fun culture around figuring these problems out, but it is really hard. The way that we're doing it, and the way we're able to do it, is that while the problem is extremely, extremely complicated, if you are encountering it for the first time ever, it is possible to get better at solving the problem. And when I say that, I'll use an example that I use a lot. 64-year-old turning 65, still works, getting all this stuff in the mail about Medicare Advantage, Medicare supplements, Medicare Part D from lots of different carriers. The employer is offering them 3 health plans, 3 different options. The employee is trying to figure out, should I do one of these 3 options from my employer, or should I go on to Medicare and do one of the Medicare options? Now, wait a minute. My wife's only 59, and she's on my employer plan. If I get off my employer plan to take Medicare, because it does look like that would be better, but I'm not really sure, but it looks like it would be better, but then we'd have to figure out an individual policy for my wife, because I would no longer be on the employer plan, so she can't be on it either. That happens a lot. That situation right there happens all the time. It's possible to design questions, both quantitative and qualitative questions, to get an understanding of what are those 3 employer options that you've got available to you. I know all the Medicare options because Medicare is Medicare. It's a box. We know what that is, what your options are. Individual health insurance, that's also a box. Now, those boxes change every year, but it's possible to update our algorithms, update our models, so that we're not encountering that problem every time for the first time. Then furthermore, by using technology across our stores and not just our retail store efforts, but our employer advisory efforts, our people in the stores can efficiently get answers to questions that if we didn't have each other, could take months to get. And so part of the way we're able to handle it is the process. The first meeting, all we would do is go through the questions we have or that we know we've identified ahead of time. We need to know the answers to these questions to be able to tell the client what the right recommendation is for that situation. Then the client leaves. And, in the early days of that team member's life with Bernard Health, they may look at the answers to those questions and say, I don't have a clue what he should do, right? But we've got a team. We can take the answers to those questions. They can work with their manager. They can work with their colleagues to develop a recommendation and gain experience so that when client comes back, they can take them all the way through the sign-up process and make sure that any problems get worked out on the back end. Another thing that really, really helps our model is that our competition is call centers and websites whose revenue model is to sell you the highest commission product that they can over the phone. So even if we make some mistakes, maybe it takes a little longer, it's way better than any of the alternatives. So how do we scale? We are getting more efficient at so most individuals, when they look for health insurance, they go online and they run quotes, right? When they do that, when they go run quotes, most of the places where they would enter their information are lead gen companies, and they sell the information. We're getting more efficient at being the ones that they find. So like we're opening in Austin, Texas next month. We'll do a lot of web-related effort to generate leads for the stores and have it be that it doesn't take us as long to get to the traffic volume we need to be break even. So the question is, do we need outside capital? We raised outside capital at the beginning of this year. We raised $1.9 million. Right now we're good for another at least 12 to 18 months. But yes, I mean, our vision is to build a national brand for healthcare advice, and we anticipate that'll require more capital down the line. So the question was, why would an employer choose working with Bernard Health instead of working with the insurance company's representative? And in fact, I'll take that question even a step further. Blue Cross of Florida has opened up retail stores. Blue Cross of Florida has a lot of different retail stores. And you can go into their stores, and there's no flat fee for anything. And in fact, they'll help you with anything as long as it's Blue Cross. Right? We fail to see a future where there is a Blue Cross store, an Aetna store, a Cigna store, a United store, a HealthSpring store in every city. The future we see is that there's going to be a brand, there's going to be one place that people know they can go, and they'll get an unbiased opinion on which carrier would be the best. So the question is, why are some of the carriers not participating in the exchanges? And United Healthcare is another good example of one that's not fully participating. I think they're not participating because they're not sure it's going to work. Why spend all the money and the heartache? You know, there's a cultural difference also in between, for example, like Blue Cross of Tennessee, which as an organization feels a strong, at a cultural level, responsibility to the state of Tennessee and Tennesseans. They're headquartered here, this is all they do, and they feel like they need to be on that exchange. Now, they also have a state Medicaid contract that they don't want to keep, and so they have business interests in being there on the exchange and participating. Whereas like a United Healthcare doesn't really have that same, I mean, they're national, they're spread out, they don't feel that same kind of responsibility. So if you look, the Blue Cross plans are generally participating. Other carriers sometimes aren't. So great question. The question was going back to how does an employer help employees make that transition to individual policies from a group policy? And the answer is that the leaders of the company is getting involved. Now, as a leader of a company, you've got a lot on your plate. You've got a lot of other priorities, right? But the opportunity for savings here, they can be reinvested and continue to grow your businesses and ensure the long-term health of your enterprise. Make it worth it to spend some time here on exactly what you're talking about, education and assurances. The question is, you know, for an employer who maybe right now has, say, let's just call it 10 employees, and is going with the approach where they're reimbursing, let's call it $250 a month, so that employees can go and get the right policy for them in the individual market. As that company grows to have more than 50 employees, where they cross that threshold where that penalty could come into play, what are the risks to that employer of one, the transition over 50 employees and possibly incurring the penalty. Well, one thing that's kind of embedded in that question is, I think as an employer, it's fair to say to count on needing to spend time looking at your health plan strategy and adjusting it at least annually. This probably is never, just like with your taxes. You don't file taxes once and then not have to worry about it for 5 years. It's something you got to do every year. This is going to be the same thing with healthcare. And it may be that maybe that penalty is going to go up. Maybe it's going to go up to a point where it'd be worth it again to have a group plan. And you'd want to transition back, in which case you would tell employees, we're not doing the $250 reimbursement anymore, because just like when we did it before, we did it because of what the tax rules were. Well, the tax rules have changed again, so now we're responding and we're doing a group strategy again. And so I would say the risk is more one that is almost impossible to avoid at this point, which is that just count on spending time looking at this. With that, thank you very much. I appreciate,
let's take Alex says, as an entrepreneur, timing is everything, and you could not have picked a better timing than Barnard Health. Congratulations on the timing, and thank you for sharing with the audience your insights this morning. On behalf of the Bank of Nashville, just want to present you this small token. The Bank of Nashville has money, so I assume this is a box of money. So thank you for the presentation. I would like to also acknowledge our other sponsors, Dev Digital, a website development company. If they had been given $100,000, we would probably have a website that works for healthcare now. I probably shouldn't price their product, but they are a development company. If you need that kind of work, you can see them. Southeast Ventures, the folks who design this space, space designers and commercial real estate, and they've been great supporters. And then the Nashville Post, Tori is over here. They really help us promote these programs and are our media sponsors. And we thank you. If you get a chance, thank our sponsors. They make this possible. If this is your first time to eSpaces, welcome. We are a work and meeting space for individual professionals and entrepreneurs, for small companies, and for corporations that need an off-site meeting space. We are kind of like software as a service. Instead of buying software, you simply access what you need when you need it. It's kind of like the Zip car, or kind of like you may have seen enterprise rental car advertising. It's shared services. And in your seats, there was a card inviting you to come and work for a day on us. We would love to have you come and try it out. You can talk to any of us, Josh Bowling standing over here, myself. There are 2 or 3 others of us here this morning. Be glad to talk to you about eSpaces if you have questions. Thank you for being here. Have a great day. Thanks for coming.